Hey, Adjust Teen Stress. I'm Ava Shrestha, and welcome back to our Beyond the Brain series, where we interview with health professionals and experts about mental health in order to get a deeper insight of different aspects of stress and mental well-being. Today, I'm here with mental health therapist Noah Hood. Noah, can you please start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, Ava. I would be happy to tell you a little bit about myself and my background. I would like to start with also saying I have a little bit of a cold, so if my voice sounds a little funny at any points, that's why. So thank you for bearing with me. My name is Noah. Any pronouns are fine that are said respectfully, he, she, they. I'm a mental health therapist and a social worker with 8 years of experience supporting diverse communities in identity exploration, trauma recovery, and self-acceptance. I specialize in gender-informed care, depression, and anxiety, and I use a variety of approaches such as mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, a strengths-based perspective, feminist theory, critical race theory, queer, polyvagal, and somatic approaches.
All right, awesome. And so, what made you choose this career field?
Hmm, that is a very good question. I grew up in rural North Carolina. It's a bit of a resource desert. So there are not many mental health professionals in the area that I grew up in. Mental health is something that's talked about in the communities and the surrounding communities that I grew up in. However, sometimes it's framed in a way of shame and othering. And I have a lot of family members, personal experience, and connection with people who have experienced mental health challenges, as well as my own. And I've always had a passion for helping people who have mental health challenges and also promoting social justice. So, being a therapist and specifically a therapist by trade of social work, it just kind of felt like a perfect fit for me.
How do you believe that social media influences teen mental health, particularly for those in the 2S LGBTQIA plus community?
I really like this question because in my field, we're talking a lot about social media and phone usage right now and how it influences teen mental health, particularly for just this is the question stated for 2S LGBTQIA plus people and all teens. I would categorize it as helpful and unhelpful. I think that technology and social media is a tool to use, just like any other tool. There are great resources for teens. It's a huge method of communication. I don't think we're going to completely get rid of, and I would argue most people don't want to completely get rid of social media. That said, for all of the help it does and these social media influencers and mental health professionals who are on there, who I also follow and enjoy their content, I think they share some great stuff. There's the kind of unhelpful or maybe even one might say like darker side of social media too, where people can kind of spiral and you can doom scroll and get caught up in content that may not be beneficial for a person's mental health. So I think it's really a balancing act. It can be helpful, it can be unhelpful. I know for me, growing up in a small community, having access to social media in many instances was the only way I felt connected to other queer people. So that's one way it's a big benefit. Um, I would just say there's a way to practice mindfulness while using social media as a teen and as a queer teen, that should be explored more. And the research in this area is still developing.
And then we're talking about mental health. So mental health is such a broad thing. How would you explain it in 3 words?
I love this question. This question really sticks out to me. I gave it some thought and I said misunderstood, evolving, and everyone. And I'd love to explain those a little bit in more depth. So, misunderstood. as the word says, I think a lot of mental health, wellness, treatment options, and what people experience and what teens experience when they're having mental health challenges is very misunderstood. The way therapy works is very misunderstood. So when clients come in to see me for a session, a lot of what we're doing, especially in the beginning, is talking about what therapy is and what it looks like. Also, not all therapists have the same approach. So someone might have had a not great experience with therapy. So I like to talk to clients about what will work for them. And there's a lot of stigma and negative and harmful stereotypes that honestly just aren't true. Especially with a lot of mental health diagnoses, there's stigma and stereotypes there. So a lot of what we do as mental health professionals is trying to destigmatize the stereotypes. So that's me explaining the misunderstood. Evolving is that mental health is a very evolving practice. In some ways, there's a lot of history, and then compared to other health fields, it's also kind of in its infancy. So we're learning things all the time. The research is coming back with all kinds of cool content. We're learning social media is a big one. We talk about a lot, all kinds of things about social media, internet addiction. Um, it's an evolving field, and it's really interesting to watch it grow. So I think it's good as mental health professionals for us to give grace as we watch the field evolve and we learn and practice as best we can within this evolving field. And then the last word I said, everyone has mental health. It's something that, sometimes I think we think of, oh, well, I don't have depression or anxiety disorder, so I don't have mental health. We all have mental health. We have mental health just as much as we have physical health or any other health that we can think of, social health. It impacts all of us. And whether we're in a good mood or a bad mood or we're experiencing a mental health challenge, it's good, in my opinion, for everyone to at least get a checkup. Just like going to the doctor for a checkup. Um, some people, and that's okay, that works for some people, only practice going to the doctor when they're very sick. But a lot of people don't shame someone for going to the doctor just for a checkup. Why can't we go to the mental health professionals just for a checkup? It's part of our health. So I like to think of health as holistic and it impacts everyone, and this includes mental health.
I love those words and those descriptions and how you elaborated. So thank you so much for that. Kind of expanding on your last word, everyone. How do you think that factors like race, socioeconomic status, and sexual orientation intersect to affect a teen's mental health?
Great question. I approach this from a social worker perspective. Um, in social work, we talk a lot about intersectionality, which was a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a researcher that talks about how a lot of these identities intersect, and people who find themselves specifically at these intersections, teens included, can be doubly or triple marginalized in some instances because they're not just dealing with one issue. They might be coming from a lower socioeconomic status. They might be a racial minority and also being younger and going through hormonal changes. There's so many intersecting identities. And yes, getting to that everyone piece and getting to that holistic piece, it's all connected. If you want to support a person, anyone who wants to support a person, whether you're a mental health professional, you're a friend who's caring about someone, um, or you're just a person in school, you're a teenager in school and you see like your friends going through a hard time, I think it's helpful and crucial even to look at that person holistically because everything can impact your mental health. And that's not to say it's all negative. There's positive traits too. There's a lot of resiliency. So many people, I see so much incredible resilience from teens and people from diverse backgrounds. And I think that that should be celebrated as well. But yeah, we just have to look at all of it. It all impacts teens' mental health.
So, when I was reading your statement, something that really caught my eye was that you like to help people in order to help find their authentic selves. So, with that being said, can you share some techniques or approaches that you believe that can help teens build that resilience to start finding their authentic selves?
Yeah, I would love to. Therapy is a big one. Not everyone has access to therapy, so I want to acknowledge that as well. It is, it can be a lifelong process. I would say there's so many techniques and approaches. I definitely would recommend finding your village. That made all the difference for me, and it's something that I've heard from many people who are queer, who are POC, who are coming from backgrounds where they felt like they were othered. Finding those people who support you for who you are, your true you, not the you that you put on because you feel like this is what society wants me to do, but who you are at your core makes all the difference. And just practicing daily to the best of your ability. Some days are easier than others, that's life, but to align with your values. Oh, and of value, there are value assessments and value charts out there. I recommend if someone can identify core, three core values, that can be incredibly helpful as well. So you identify those core values, and anytime you're doing something in life, especially if it's a big decision, you ask yourself, how does this align with my core values? And I think these are just a few practices and techniques that can help teens align with their authentic selves.
I totally agree. I definitely think that these are some techniques that can help teens. But with that being said, what do you think are some specific challenges that teens can face and see as they transition to adulthood? And how can therapy help navigate those challenges?
So many great questions. Transitions are life. Life is transitions. Transition from being a teenager to being an adult is a very large one. Most of us experience it. Therapy can be incredibly helpful, and therapy helps because therapists are a sounding board. Um, when we're in a session, I'm building rapport with the client and I'm learning who the client is and what it is about them that makes them who they are. And they might be discovering that at the same time. So it's also really beautiful the process to watch someone discover themselves as well. Um, I'm just reading the question again because I want to make sure I'm fully, authentically answering it. What specific challenges do you see for teens as they transition to adulthood? And how can therapy help navigate those challenges? Independence is a big one. I think of developmental stages. We talk a lot in my program and in my field about developmental stages. And I think for teenagers transitioning into adulthood, independence is very big. You're kind of learning, okay, how is it to live as an adult? How do I pay taxes now? What do I do? How do I apply for college? And it can feel really overwhelming. So I think therapy can help clients process some of those overwhelming feelings and put it into silos or kind of compartmentalize. Okay, yes, these are big feelings. These big feelings are valid. We can't do it all at once. No one can. So, what is your primary goal that you want to work on right now? And then we break it down into smaller chunks. So, those are some of the ways that therapy can kind of help that navigation into that adult life, the adulting, the independency, and those sorts of things.
And then a little bit earlier, you talked about how something that happens within mental health is that there's so many different stereotypes and how it's not as important as physical health and so on, like you were mentioning earlier. So again, kind of to expand on that, what do you think are some common misconceptions that occur on the topic of mental health or misconceptions that you've heard within the topic of therapy or therapists?
Some of the common misconceptions I've heard, so crazy, that's a word. I try to hold respect. The language we use is so important. And there's a time and a place for language. However, as mental health professionals, and some may have differing opinions on this, we're individuals too, but many of us, I would say, and myself at least, I try to avoid using the word crazy um, as I'm using it, but in a mental health context, I do not use that word, just using it for the purposes of saying it can be very harming and damaging, some of the words we choose. Um, and I would just say shame. Shame is a big piece of the misconception, the stigma, in that as a society and different communities, diverse communities handle it differently than others. But I see a common thread is that some things just aren't talked about, or if they are talked about, it's very surface level, or people don't even have a full understanding of what some of these mental health diagnoses are. And that's okay. We can learn together. And I think another thing is that some people feel like they are their diagnosis, or they feel like there's kind of a grief and relief to getting a diagnosis sometimes. Sometimes people think in mental health and therapy, and for therapists, like, oh, this diagnosis everything. They're going to diagnose me. They're going to try and put me on medicine. No, 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 no. Some people, medication works for. Um, Other people, a combination of medication and therapy. Other people, just therapy with no medication. And it's very individualized. And what works for someone might not work for someone else. People are not broken. People are not their diagnosis. And I think I would just touch back on the piece where I said everyone has mental health. We all have it. We might as well all take care of it. Go for a little walk. Go for a little mental health walk. Reward yourself to a little treat every now and then. Um, and then also talk about a piece of, maybe this would be a future interview because I could go into a long conversation about radical self-care, because the little things we do for ourselves are good too, but what really sustains you? What makes you feel good as a person? Not something that you feel like you have to do because like you saw like this advertisement for it in like a supermarket. Like what makes you feel good as a person or refuels you? That's different for different people. And there's so many misconceptions about therapy as a practice. I could talk about that for a long time, but I would say a big one, the belief that diagnosis and medication are big for therapists, those are pretty big. And as I was saying just a minute ago, um, there's so much more to therapy than that. And hmm, therapists don't give advice. That's the last thing I will say. We make suggestions based on what the clients are telling us. Um, and we help like if we use like a sailboat analogy, like the client is the driver of that sailboat. We just might help give like a compass or a map so they have the tools to decide where they want to go. We don't tell them where to go. So those are some of the misconceptions. Thank you. That felt a little tangential, but thank you for letting me explain that. I hope it made sense.
It definitely did. I definitely think that there is a lot of misconceptions, so I'm really glad that you went over it. in the topic of mental health and therapy and therapists and everything like that. But talking about mental health once again, why do you think that it's important for everyone to be educated on the topic of just general mental health and stress?
I feel like I can wrap this one up a little more succinctly because this is what we've been talking about, right? Everyone has it. That's why it's important for everyone to be educated on it. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's a radical thing, and I hope I'm sorry if that makes people feel some kind of way, but it's true. We all have a brain, we all have a mind, we all have a sense of self and self-worth, and we may not, some people in their lives may not experience something that would be considered as significant diagnosis. However, we do all share grief, we share pain, we share joy, we share love, and we share really big feelings. And sometimes those feelings last for a while, and sometimes that's okay. And other times we might need to process them with a mental health professional or someone we trust so we can move on. So, mental health, we all have it.
And then I have one last question for you. What advice would you give to someone out there that's struggling with their mental health, or just some kind of message that you'd like to leave to our Address Teen Stress audience?
Mm, the world can feel heavy now more than ever. I feel certainly more than when I was a teenager. Teens are so politically aware these days and exposed to so many things worldwide, even. It can feel incredibly overwhelming. Teens and adults, teens for the sake of this interview, I imagine can feel like what can be done. My message would be to always, to the best of your ability, hold on to that hope. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Love always wins. It doesn't always feel that way, and sometimes these things take an incredibly long time. But please, please, please hold out that hope. Keep on keeping on. And if you want a therapist who is queer affirming, feel free to reach out. But really, hold on. It's going to be okay.
Thank you so much, Noah, for talking to us today about mental health and your experience with it throughout your professional career, as well as thank you so much for helping us address teen stress.